Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before we get into it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone, if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Karen Wright on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from Canada. We got another Canadian on the podcast. But yeah, she's on here to share her health and fitness journey and discuss all things health and fitness. And I'm not going to give away too much. I'm going to let her spoil it for everyone. But it's impressive that she looks the way that she looks, and it's going to be a great conversation. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Karen, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
I normally ask what the weather's like, but I'm not even going to try because good God. But so to get things started, Karen, why don't you just give us your backstory on what inspired and motivated you to get in shape and how that led to where you're at right now?
I think it started as a kid. I did track and field. I did gymnastics in elementary school and through high school. And in high school, we wanted to lift weights, the girls, but it was only for boys back then. And we talked them into letting us go in and use the gym because it was always in the boys' change room one day a week. So we were very excited and made sure that we went in and utilized that. And I think I was probably only about 16 and continued lifting weights from there. So when I went into college when I was 17, I joined a gym and have pretty much worked out since then. My father, who was in the military, he worked out with weights until probably COVID started. So he's 91 now, and so I mean, I saw him doing that also my whole life. I didn't get as into the weightlifting heavy until probably after I had kids, because when you start having kids, you can't be as intense. But I did work out with weights through all three pregnancies. And I think it helps to keep you in shape. It made delivery a lot easier. It just with everything. And then we got into farming. And again, the weightlifting was a little bit in the background. But by the time the kids were done school, it was probably about 7 years ago. The youngest was finished high school. I decided I have time now. We weren't farming anymore. I still work full time, but I thought I'm going to focus on working out and following a program. So we did. My husband has always worked out as well, so it's nice that we can do that together. And we've always done it from home. We did join a gym for a few years. Just you can use some different equipment, and thought it would be different, but it's still nicer just to be able to walk downstairs and do it in the basement. And then when COVID came along, it was handy that we had it because I think I did my first competitions in 2019. So we were going to the gym, but after that, we had to do all the working out at home. So we've just expanded our gym and bought more equipment instead of going out to a gym. So we have pretty much everything that we want right now, which is good. And that's pretty much where I've been. Like I've done 7 competitions, I guess, over that time. And my first goal was to get my pro card. And it takes a while at this age because you're competing in Canada to do pro qualifiers. The masters division is 35 and up to get a pro card. So you're up against these very nice, pretty young girls that haven't maybe some of them, they've certainly had kids, but the more years you have on, the more you realize how hard it is to get your waist really small again. So I saw the opportunity to go to Pittsburgh, and we went, and I just lucky, I guess, and a lot of hard work that I got my pro card last week. So it's very exciting.
I didn't mention that in the intro because I didn't want to spoil it for everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yes, that was very exciting. I tried not to, I'm the type of person that I don't think, and maybe I shouldn't be so negative, but I always think, I don't go into something thinking I'm going to win, it's sort of, people will say to me, "Oh, you look really good. You're going to get this," and I'm like, please don't say that because I feel like it jinxes me, but I'm glad. I was really happy with the outcome, so that was good. And so I'm planning. I haven't figured out yet, but looked at all the shows. I'd like to do at least two pro shows next year. I think my next goal is going to be like to be able to get a win, and I don't expect to win in an open pro show because, again, they're all very young. But there's a lot of good masters pro shows, and again, it really just depends. For me, I'm very self-critical, and I see. What things need to be worked on and where I need improvements and I would my biggest focus over this next year is going to be to try and shrink my waist. It bothers me because as a young girl, I had a 24-inch waist like all the time. And you have three kids, and I'll be 60 in February, and I struggle to get it down to like 28 inches is the struggle. So and that's always been my feedback from the judges is you need a smaller waist. So what I've been doing is make my lats bigger, make my shoulders bigger, make my legs bigger. And again, that's all hard to do the older you get, but you can still do it. It just takes time. So that's what we're going to work on for the next year, and it's going to be really exciting.
I mean, I saw that video of you flexing your abs basically on the medicine ball. So when you're talking about your waist, I was like, oh, I think she's got it down pretty much on pat. But no, again, there's always improvements that need to be made. But when you were younger, were you familiar with the sport of bodybuilding at all, or what was your first exposure to the sport?
So we first went to a bodybuilding show, and we were trying to think about that the other day. I think it was about at least 30 years ago. So I knew of it in the sense that we bought all the magazines, right? That Flex and Muscle Mag was out back then. And I didn't know what was involved to get to that level. So there wasn't, and it's sad because the information wasn't there. For us, like now, you can just go on Instagram and you can find everything you need to know about how should you diet and how like exercise different programs and we you get some stuff out of a magazine, but I would say it was like I knew about bodybuilding before that, but didn't know what you needed to do. And then we went to the competition, and I think it was about 30 years ago. And it was then that I thought, I want to do this. Like, I want to compete in bodybuilding. And I tried to do the dieting, but again, the information was really limited. And I probably was able to get maybe halfway there lean wise, on your own without any help. So, and again, you didn't even know where to go find a coach, right? Because none of that stuff was available. So I think as time went on and things became more available, you realize through, reading and listening to people what's really involved. And I probably started looking more into it serious again, probably about 10 years ago, because more information was available. So that was when I started focusing on it a little bit more. But it also helps that my middle daughter, she's 28 now, but she's an IFBB pro in fitness. So she did that 5 years ago. So this is the one I put, I could see her potential as a child, put her into gymnastics, and she competed on the Canadian team for aerobic gymnastics. So that led her into the fitness. So that was where we got even more exposure and started to go to shows because she was competing. And I remember trying to practice routines like even 20 years ago and thinking, gosh, I think I'm going to have to do one of the categories that I don't have to do gymnastics anymore. Because even by then, like if you don't practice it all the time, like your flexibility is gone and the tumbling. And I thought, no, I've got to do a category where, because I thought I could do fitness because I used to do gymnastics, but uh, that's for you have to have done that all along. Like I don't think you can stop for 10 or 15 years and then think you can do it again. But yeah, it's been there a long time.
Do you think genetic wise your daughter took more from your husband or from you?
Well, she looks almost exactly like me. Structure wise, she's a little bit shorter, but her structure is pretty much the same as mine. But she is very strong, and my husband's also very strong. He's again like the same. We're both 5'6", but he is naturally very strong as well. And then you look at my father, who is he's a bigger man, but also very naturally strong. So, I mean, they certainly got genetics from both sides on the natural strength, and for her the flexibility. For me as well in the gymnastics. So she had a good gene pool to work with.
I'm similar to you, but different. I am descended from generations of farmers who just have that unbelievable grip strength, especially, and they're just
Yeah,
naturally in shape. But I'm 6'3" and one of the least flexible people you'll ever meet in your entire life. So just, hey, we're all given what we're born with, but the mentality that you need to have to compete is something that the general public just isn't that aware of.
yeah.
How much of a shock was that to you? Just to like you were talking about, you didn't know that much about what it was like to compete, but once you find out about just the mental strength, which is 100 times more important than any of the physical side of this sport, what has this journey been like for you mentally?
Um, I think I handled it fairly well. I've done this all without a coach, as well. Um, I think it's just my personality that I don't allow things to bother me a lot. I've always had a fairly stressful job in the sense that very very fast paced. I've always worked in manufacturing and supply chain. So if you're in supply chain and manufacturing, everything is your fault, and you have
Me as well.
yeah. So you have to be used to that type of of environment, and so I don't let things bother me that way. I can stay fairly calm, and I think that maybe helps not let things bother you too badly. And I understand fully when I do stuff that I shouldn't have done that, I'm on a prep or whatever, but I know where I can deviate and do things, and I know where I have a point where, okay, you're either going to do this or you're not. And I was amazed at how much willpower I had, because when I was younger, and you'd think, oh, I'm going to try and do a diet. I don't know why I tried to diet, because I never needed to, but you think you do, and you'd always want to eat something sugary or bad. But I was amazed in how I was able to not do that, and I was okay with it. I think just as long as at some point I'll eat those things, but um, for me, it was more trying to keep my stomach stable. Just not that I have a lot of problems, but I realized after having kids, my stomach doesn't like a lot of sugar, uh, things like that anyway. So I was staying away from so much of that just to feel better, that it was just another reason to say to yourself, oh, I don't have to eat that stuff, and I don't, and I'll feel better. So the last prep, like leading up to Pittsburgh, I struggled with a little bit more, just because I think I was just starting to feel very tired, because I did a show in June and then kind of just stayed the same for the next 3 months, right? And just tried to lean out a little bit more. So it was a very long, drawn out prep, and I was starting to feel tired. So, but I still managed to keep everything together. But I ate a lot after the show.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And this is just also so much more of a time commitment as well. It's a selfish sport, but I don't say that in a negative way. It's selfish in that you are sacrificing a lot of your time. How do you try to find somewhat of a balance in your life, being that, like you said, you still work full time and you do this lifestyle, and even though your kids might be growing up, you're still a mom, and two of those three is enough to even drive me crazy. So I can't imagine doing all three of them.
Yeah.
How do you try to find somewhat of a balance in your life?
I think now because well, I mean, the kids are all grown. Like the youngest is 25. He's the youngest and the oldest have moved out. So, they're not that you don't see them or think about them or talk to them, but you're not having to do things for them. Our one other daughter, she still lives here, but I mean, she lives independently, obviously. But I think we've just, because the farming is gone and I'm so used to being busy 24/7, working full time, raising three kids. We farmed, we had up to 300 sheep, and I managed most of the farm because my husband also worked off the farm. So I was so used to being so busy. Right now, I feel like if I sit down for 15 minutes, I'll be like, what are we doing? Like, should we not be doing something? When are we working out? What, on the weekends even. Okay, when are we working out? Okay, then I got to go and do this. Like I just it's never really gotten in the way because we don't do long workouts. An hour and a half. Like for me, it's do more quality in the workout. We usually work out 5 to 6 times a week. Um, it just depends on where we are in prepping where with shows, but we still do like 4 or 5 workouts in a row and then take a day off and then go from there, and it works for us. We do have long days. We come home, we have dinner and work out, and then we still relax for a couple hours in the evening, and I guess because we both enjoy doing it, that's what makes it work, is that we both do it together. I think it would probably be a struggle if you were in a situation, in a relationship where one wasn't completely interested at all. So I think that's why I'd like him to compete also, but he's not, he doesn't want to, but he certainly could.
I'm trying not to freak out a little bit because I've always wanted to talk to someone who's been associated with sheep because there was a someone that I lived close by when I was growing up had a few sheep, but I never really got to talk to him about it. And sheep have always fascinated me. So I have to have one tangent question here before we get back to health and fitness. What would you say is probably the biggest misconception that the general public or like the media, even in general, has about sheep?
Sheep look for ways to die all the time. And if you have livestock, and honestly, this is a big part of the reason why we got out of it. Um, it's not a nice thing, but like sheep are worse than cattle. They Right from birth, you'll lose 10% at birth. You'll lose another 10% before they wean. You'll lose another 10% before you get them to market. So, your lambing rate, if you get 100 lambs off of whatever you had for use, if you end up with 50 to 60 to sell, like you're doing pretty good. So I think once your flock gets really big and you start to realize that that percentage is huge, and I used to spend almost every night, all night in the barn during lambing because I wanted to make sure everybody was okay. And it didn't matter what you did. You made sure they came out, they got up, they were dry, they got a drink, they looked good. You go in to have a nap and you come out and the mother has laid on that lamb and killed it. And then we had coyote problems. I mean, you always have something. There was just, and then when you start getting bigger flocks, there's all these diseases that all animals get, but some of them are just difficult to get through. You just get weird stuff from mosquitoes. We had hay brought to us from Alberta one year when it was a drought, and they brought tetanus because tetanus was in the ground out there. Like you don't realize how, I don't think people realize that how much you have to deal with that almost on a daily basis, and it hardens you. So I just finally said, it was almost 20 years that we had them, and I said, I really we need to not have the sheep anymore because it was so heartbreaking because you want everything to be okay, and there's just some animals you can't save, and you just feel really bad walking out to the barn and going, yeah, that one's not going to live, just leave it. Like you just think that's a horrible way to be. So
Well, it's similar to I have a grandpa, or I mean, I have a great uncle who had a farm in Nebraska, and what would happen is people would leave their cats that they didn't want to him, and eventually it grew into like 50, 60 cats that would just kind of like roam around his place. But the sad thing was, every winter when we'd come back, there'd only be about 10 or 15 of them left because of the coyotes. And then you would just maybe one of them might even let you pet them, but they were all just kind of like scared of people. But yeah, farm living definitely hardens you as a person when it comes to that stuff. And you just realize nature is nature too. So it's, you
I
know,
know you do. Um, but it that's hard.
yeah.
But I did enjoy, like, there was nothing nicer than seeing, the whole flock out on a nice green field with all their lambs and everybody happy. It always, it looks very pretty and romantic. So
That's what I've always whenever I see sometimes some sheep out there, I was like, "Oh, that just looks great." And then I didn't realize how badly sheep just want to end it, I guess. But I guess you're gonna find
yeah,
all these ways. But yeah, that is crazy. Well, thank you for sharing that because that's something now that I can use as knowledge myself in case I ever want to get invested in sheep myself. I might have to tell someone before they do it, "Hey, listen to my podcast that I did with someone who did worked in that." But I mean, back to competing, this just mindset that you have to compete, it's very type A, like you said, you have a job that really, requires that as well. But this competitive lifestyle, have you used that mindset that you need to have in other areas of your life other than your job? Because I've always said if you can compete in a bodybuilding show, you can really do anything.
I think it was the other way around for me, is just having worked over 30 years or more, however many it's been, in this. Like, I started in engineering and then moved into supply chain, and that's always been the type of work I've been in. So you're very used to, and I have an A-type personality as well, and um, I don't need to be the center of attention. And I think you need a little bit of that to go on stage. So that was probably the one thing that I had to work on. I'm not, doesn't bother me to speak in front of people because I've had to do a lot of seminars. I used to do a lot of those types of speeches in through my work over the years. So I'm okay in front of crowds of people. It's just, I think it was just that very first show of, can I walk out with a bathing suit on, with these shoes on, and not fall, first of all. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I think about all the time. It doesn't bother me going out to do it. It's, God, I hope I don't trip in these shoes, because I don't wear high heel shoes anymore on a regular basis. And you always think, oh, I'm just like, I'm going to trip on these shoes. But no, I think it's what I've been doing in work and that type of stuff helped me have, I don't know what you call it, just the experience, or just not being nervous about going out on stage really at all.
It definitely takes a certain personality to be able to step out on stage in a bikini, regardless of if you're in the best shape of your life or not. Just that takes a lot of courage. But have there been any tips and tricks that you've found to be very effective when it comes to maintaining size and still growing muscle as you've gotten older? Because so many people unfortunately have that belief that once you reach a certain age, like it just can't be done. Like you just got to give up. I've talked to too many people that are like that, and then I always just say, hey, you can do it anyway. But is there any like thing that you found specifically works the best for you that really helps to increase that size even as you are getting older?
I think you learn constantly as you go along, and I'm still learning more, certainly on the diet and supplements. But naturally, and my genetics helped me. So I went and had a couple of scans done just because I wanted to see, the DEXA scan to see where my body fat percentage was at. And I'm still scanning at the top 99 percentile for women in their 30s for bone density and mass. So I think a lot for me is genetics. I had that body type when I was younger that I could easily put muscle on. It obviously takes a little bit longer at this age, but I find um, what I'm noticing is getting the right diet, but also figuring out the supplements, figuring out how to eliminate any cortisol or stress in the system. So you learn all these little things that isn't necessarily, I mean, yes, you can go and do gear, that will help. But if you have high stress or your stomach isn't functioning or you're not getting, all of the right amino acids in your diet, you're still not going to grow with quality muscle, I guess. And that's what you want. So, like I say, I'm constantly reading and learning, and I've learned a lot. And I'm sure there's still more to do, but I realize the diet is probably the biggest thing. And yes, you can do all of that other stuff. And certainly for a woman at this age, if she wants to grow muscle, I mean, people don't want to hear it, but you're going to have to do some form of gear. That's just the way it is.
Well, and when it comes to stress, you're talking to someone who's 29, and I am probably 15 years away if I keep it up from having the good old heart attack and just ringing the bell early, just because I can be very stressful at times. How do you deal with stress? How are you able to not be as stressed out like you were talking about?
I think it's a lot of mind over matter. Like it has to be a lot of that. So, getting the sleep cycles as well. So that going through menopause, and I never had trouble sleeping before that, and that sort of messed stuff up for me. So it was getting again what's missing in my body. That I'm not sleeping. So I've done a lot of research again on some different natural supplements, right, that help with sleep. And I go and have a massage once a month. I go to the chiropractor once a month. I go for acupuncture once a month. So doing like these other types of things as well to keep all your structure working properly, keep all the nerves working properly. I went out. What was our last thing? My husband always calls this stuff my voodoo stuff that I do, but it's all stuff that I'm trying to do to be more natural in trying to fix stuff. So we need to sleep better. So I got grounding sheets for us, and I actually think it's helping a little bit. So every little thing you can do, because with stress if you can sleep well, that's going to help. If you can do breathing exercises, which, I try to do, but again, everybody gets a little bit of stress and then they forget about it. But I'm finding, and the older you get, it's easier just to say, you know what, I'm not going to allow that to bother me anymore. And I can certainly do that at work. Like 30 years ago, I would have been the person right on someone in the argument. No, we're not doing this, whatever. Now I'm like, you know what? That's a good idea. Let's talk about it and then we'll see which way we're going to go. So I think you realize there's no point in getting yourself uptight about stuff. And you do over time learn to just, you know what? It's okay. We can just go that way or go this way. Let's just pick the right way for the business. And but that takes a while. It does take a while of practice. And I don't think I realized it till I was over 50. So
Hopefully, it doesn't take me that long, I will say. But breathing exercises, what do you do for breathing? Because I have honestly been looking into breathing exercises because my roommates recommended that for me when they're like, I do some breathing exercises and it really helps. But I think stuff works differently for people. So for you, what breathing exercises work best for you?
well, it's just, and it's not for very long, but just breathing in really deep through your nose and then out through your mouth. I'd gone to a naturopath probably 20, 25 years ago, and she had told me back then that my I guess not my body type, but however she was reading my body, she was saying I needed to do more relaxation things to calm, to get rid of the cortisol. So breathing exercises and yoga. I tried yoga, it didn't really work for me. But that's also why I don't do intense cardio of any sort, because I don't do well with it. My body doesn't like that high intensity. So if I do any cardio when I'm prepping, I bounce on a little mini trampoline for 20 minutes. There's my cardio. So, yes, I do the weight workout, but it's, to me, that's different than like killing yourself with 30 minutes running or on a bike. And I like to lay on the inversion table and just do breathing exercises when I'm on that for like 10 minutes. And I don't know, just all of that stuff together. Sometimes when you're driving, I always find that's the best. I have to drive an hour back and forth to work. So you spend that time doing some breathing exercises. Yeah, luckily I can work remote a few days a week now, so that's not too bad. But I go into the office a couple days a week, so it's an hour both ways.
Luckily, my job is literally 2 minutes away, so I can actually come home for lunch
Yeah,
and do all that other stuff because, yeah,
yeah, that's
that's
nice.
oh yeah, it is definitely a benefit. But we gotta talk about posing because so many people don't understand that for a lot of competitors, that is the hardest thing for them. I would have never guessed that in a million years. What is your
It
relationship with posing
is.
like?
So, as with everyone who starts out, I had no idea what I was doing. But I luckily met a woman before my first competition, and I think it was a posing clinic. That's what it was. I went to a posing clinic and met her there. And so I went and took some additional one on one sessions with her, because you don't realize how you have no idea how to pose. And I have to say, it probably took me another, I'm going to say, 2 years of practicing and figuring out, because then you have to try and get that connection to the muscles. Am I actually flexing? Like, am I actually pulling my shoulders out? And it's true, you need to do it every day, and I'm not great at that. Like, I mean, like, we put mirrors up in the gym just so I could do the posing, and I have to say I need to do more of it, and I probably will next year. uh, Go and work with another coach a little bit, just to try and get some of the little tricks. But I know I've improved when I look at pictures, and I know there's always room for improvement, but it is difficult to get. And I see it for other women, how they hold their hands, where they put their shoulders, doing the side poses as well, and and that goes right back to, can you hold that stomach in the way you're supposed to, which is the hardest part. So, yeah, but for anyone who doesn't take any classes at all, yeah, I would recommend for everyone to spend a little bit of time with a posing coach, just because you can't figure that stuff out yourself, even by watching it, because you don't understand what they're doing with their muscles. Yeah.
Well, on top of that, how was the front spread? How long did it take for you to develop that? Because that's the one pose when I talk to people that it's just you're. I mean, I've talked to people that have taken years to really develop that because it's just so hard to feel that separation and to cause it. It's a nightmare for a lot of guests.
I think I finally figured it out probably last year. So it's been 40. So it was probably 3 years before I finally went, oh, now I feel it. I actually have them in the right spot. And from there, it's just, for me, it's okay, now make sure, do I have the shoulders up at the right place? How far out so you don't look dumb? They always say don't do this. So it's somewhere in between, so your lats are out as far as you can, but yet your arms still look relaxed. And the hardest part is, you're always practicing in front of a mirror, but you have to make sure you practice with someone, not in front of a mirror, because that's when you realize, hey, you hold one arm like way out of place when you don't have the mirror in front of you. So, yeah.
Posing could be its own podcast in and of itself. I mean, even just the stamina that it requires, where people don't understand that a lot of people are more sore after their posing sessions than they are after their workouts. I mean, it is definitely the unknown the unknown factor that a lot of people don't understand. But unfortunately, it is something that has to be done. But when they called your name and you realized, oh my God, I'm a pro now, what was going through your mind? What was that moment like?
I think you just almost for me, I mean, I was so glad, but I'm not an external emotion showing type person. So for everybody that was there, they were probably just like, "Oh, well, she just looks kind of happy." Because I you watch back on other videos and everyone just going, "Oh my God," and doing all this stuff, and I'm like, I'm not that type of person. So I mean, you would never expect to see that from me, but I was just so happy, and I was so happy to see, like, my husband was there watching, just to be able to make eye contact with him, that, that I'd finally done that. And he's always been my biggest supporter. Oh, you should have had that one, at other shows I was at. I'm like, well, there's no point in saying that because it's who's there and it's what the judges decide, and I can't change anything. But um, yeah, I was just very happy because um, I felt I was I feel like I'm at the right place. I know I can improve more. Um, but I really felt that I had done more than what was needed to be at that level at that show. So I was happy.
Well, and I mean, you're not the average looking 59-year-old woman. If you were to walk down the street dressed the way you are right now, it's like being a mini celebrity. You're going to draw people's attention just because when it's something that's not the normal, it's hard for people to just be like, wow, what's going on there? So how has that been? And has it gotten easier for you as you've, you know, done more and more shows and done more and more seasons to accept the fact that like, hey, I am going to draw people's attention?
I guess I don't see it as much as my husband does. Because he's always like, "Oh, you can see all the people looking at you." I'm like, "No, I don't notice it." If somebody was to say something to me, and I do get a few people that will come up and say something, and I'm fine with it. As long as they're not nasty or something. And I haven't had anybody do that to my face. But I mean, people have their own opinions, and to me, just keep it to yourself. But like you realize that. Um, it's a very small percentage of people that put the time in to work out this way, and not everybody wants to. I mean, everybody has their own thoughts of what they want to look like, and this is always what I've wanted, is to be built. I mean, I used to look at like I said, I used to look at all those pictures from 30 or more years ago and think that's what I want to look like. Um, and this is what I want to look like for, there's no reason why I can't stay this way, for the next more 10, 20 years. I mean, there are women who are still competing up at that age. So that's what I want to do.
Yeah. I've talked to a few of the 7-year-olds and I tell them like I don't even want to have you on just because it embarrasses me so much that I'm just like, okay, I definitely got to like do something right as soon as I'm done talking to them. But you talk about motivation. That's about as motivating as it can be. And how long did it take you to finally have that set in of like, oh my God, I'm gonna be a little fish in a big pond now that I'm a pro now? And how have you been dealing with that? Because I'm one of those psychopaths where if I after we'd win like maybe a tournament or a championship in any sport, I'd celebrate for like 5 minutes and I'd be like, we gotta do this again now. Crap. And then I would kind of just go through my mind. But how long did it take you before you finally had that realization of like, oh my God, I'm gonna be competing against pros now?
I think I felt it right away. And that's where the planning starts, right? And then I think to myself, okay, it's probably going to be like 10 months before, if I do the one show next June that I'm thinking about for the first one. So I'm like, you have to keep calm, and not get myself worked up over it. You know what I mean? Um, but it is kind of weird when you look at stuff now and you're like, oh, now if people look at me, I'm like I'm a pro. Haven't competed as one yet, but if I attained that status, and that kind of feels cool because um, I'm hoping some of the women that I've been following that I'll be able to actually go to shows and compete with them on stage, right? And that would be cool. Um, I'm still like I think I'll stay in the figure division, but I've always toyed with the possibility of trying physique, if I can figure out the posing.
I mean, I've talked to some people. A lot of people say it's easier to, and plus you get to do some nice poses though too. But either way, yeah, it's. Is there any? Are there any like few of them in particular that you're looking forward to competing against the most? Like anyone that we should be following?
um, I'm not really sure. Like, I mean, you follow all the Olympian figure athletes, and you just think, oh, it would just be cool to one day be on a stage with one of them. You know that you could never compete against them, but I mean, Autumn. Oh, I'm terrible with last names, but
Cleveland. Yeah.
yes, yeah, I did meet her in Pittsburgh, and I thought that would be cool. I mean, and these are all young girls, right? I love Jessica Pedalia. I would love to see her, meet her. Um, like all of the ones that have been on the Olympia stage, it just would be so cool. Just to be there, because you can't get a sense of how big they are. They look so big, but you want to, and not in a bad way, but you just want to be like, I can't get a sense of, am I big or am I small in comparison, because you're just looking at pictures, and that's where it would be cool to just be standing beside someone, and that would really help you understand, okay, I need to grow this or whatever. But it's so hard when you just have pictures to look at, but to be able to be next to them, and you see how developed they are, and like how they condition that they can get to is just amazing. It just would be neat to see that in person, because usually at the pro qualifier level of shows, I mean, it's difficult for people. There's a lot of learning involved to get that conditioning down. So you don't see people at the same condition as you do in a pro show. Like it's so different. And um, it'll be neat to I want to pick a show just to be on stage with some of those girls. I mean, I don't expect to ever place against those young girls, but I just want to be on stage with them.
Well, yeah, and you never know either. But being that you've been involved just in the health and fitness lifestyle for so long, what has that been like to see just that part changed as drastically as it has over, say 30 years or so? Because just in my lifetime, being 29, and even from 10 years ago, seeing how things have changed, I can't imagine what it's been like to witness it for that long a period of time. What have been some of the biggest changes that you've seen in just the health and fitness aspect?
It's the food. It's understanding the food. When I think 30 years ago, what we ate, and we thought we were eating the right things for like a diet, and we were eating meat, but there's so many more things you can choose from now. Um, in not so much like just keto, but foods like that they're coming out with that are so different, and then realizing so much of the stuff that we were eating back then, nobody realized certain foods, they were bothering your stomach anyways. We shouldn't have been eating them. I think it's just that whole understanding of all nutrition and how it works differently in everyone, and we were so limited in what was available. Like, you had your basic meat and potatoes and some rice, right? And now you look at go on Instagram and see all of the different things that you can make and choose from and buy. Like, there was no energy drinks, and not that I drink them anymore, but I did at one time. But you couldn't get energy drinks, you couldn't get pre-workouts. Nobody knew anything about all of the and that I was aware of, and it was probably just starting up, like things like citrulline, all of those different aminos to help open up your arteries, like do all of the stuff that's healthy for you. But we didn't know about it. Just those changes, and I think just the fact of the internet and all of that information is so easy to find now. Whereas back 30, 40 years ago, if somebody didn't write about it in a magazine, you were not going to know about it. And that, stayed true to even 30 years ago. We had the internet, but there wasn't that much information available. I think it's more in the last 10 to 15 that it feels like it's really exploded with more information, and now more people are doing studies on effects of all of this stuff. It's amazing the studies that you can read about in nutrition, um, and the people coming out, like even doctors coming out now talking about types of food that we shouldn't be eating because they're not helping us, but yet it's stuff that they've told us all along. Well, we should be eating this. And then you find out, well, that's probably what's been bothering your stomach. And you cut it out of your diet and suddenly you feel different. So I would have to say that's just so different because of not having the internet. I think I had one book. What did we have? It was Arnold Schwarzenegger's book that he probably put out like 40 years ago or something, or maybe even more than that, on bodybuilding, and it had a little bit of information about diet in it, and that was about all we had.
Oh, I just remember watching those old videos of teams playing sports, and just even the pictures where you'd have, even for hockey, you'd have some guys smoking cigarettes in between shifts on the bench, and then like you'd have during the first Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs starting quarterback was drinking a beer and smoking a cigarette at halftime in the locker room. And obviously they knew it wasn't the healthiest thing back then, but like just to see how much everything has changed now, where you won't see them even drink one drop of anything that's unhealthy for them throughout an entire season of doing stuff. It's just, yeah, I honestly would have never guessed nutrition until you honestly brought it up too. I was like, oh, the weights, because like my dad was always a huge Nautilus guy back in the day, and he'd always tell me like, you don't know how good you have it compared to the stuff that we had to deal with back in our day when it comes to exercise. But yeah, so many things have changed, and it's just, obviously it's a lot of it is for the better. But when it comes down to, all this other stuff that's happening and changing the sport as well, the one thing that's always stayed a constant is the fact that when you become a bodybuilder, you kind of deal with the devil when it comes to, you're going to get these great looks, but unfortunately, you're never going to be good enough. You're never going to be big enough. Uh,
Yeah, I know.
no matter what. I mean, I've talked to Andrea Shaw on here, the reigning Miss Olympia, like 3 times, and even she'll tell you like, I'm not good enough. And then you're just like, what is wrong with you? But how do you deal with the body dysmorphia? Because I was always under the opinion, because I was an idiot, that, oh, the bigger and stronger that I got, the less I'd be, you know, insecure about my body, but how little I knew back then.
And I don't know if it's insecurity or just when you get that look, that stage look, not having that sort of messes with your head. Some girls, and you read about it as well, and some girls are okay with it, but for me, because I've never been heavy my whole life, like even being pregnant, I gained 30 or 40 pounds with a pregnancy, and then it was all gone. So that that is more in my head, that I don't like not being some form of lean. So for me, even off season, I probably at most put 10 pounds back on. And that at least works with my head okay. Because any more than that, I think it would just bother me too much. I think it would. I've not got to that point, and I wouldn't need to because I don't need to do a huge bulk. I'm figure. I don't have to put on a whole lot of lean mass, and I know I can put it on and still stay fairly lean because I've been able to do it. So I don't need to put on another, like, if I put on another 10 pounds of lean, I'd be too big for figure. So you have to kind of watch where you are, because right now I'm at my height, I'm 5'6", and I competed in Pittsburgh. I was probably about 150 pounds. And that's pretty big for somebody that's 5'6". Now, I have I have big bones, and I know that from having the scan, so I know that's where some of the weight is. But when I look at some of these other girls, and they used to give the heights and weights on the Olympia, and that's where you realize, like, you see them come out and you're like, she's 5'6", and she's like 135 on stage. I'm like, I can't weigh 135 at all. So you can't compare, but you kind of do when it's the same height. Um, but I also know, if I was lean 150 or 155, that's getting a little bit, to me, that's getting a little bit too big for figure, for my structure. I would probably, should lean towards more the physique. So I don't know. But yeah, I try not to bulk up off season.
Hey, if it happens, it happens. But before we get to the final few questions, I got to ask, what are you doing for shoulders? Because I would get killed in the comments down below if I didn't ask you for your shoulder workout, because that's the number one body part when I ask people, like, what's one body part that took off you and what's one that dragged behind? And like you said, you're still even trying to put on some size to help with the waist illusion. But what are you doing for
Yeah.
shoulders? Because even talking to you now, like, you're almost not even fitting in the screen.
So I do my shoulders probably every second workout. So when we do chest and shoulders, I'll do 4 exercises. I always do rear delts, laterals, front delts, and then some sort of press. And then when we work out arms, I also do extra sets of laterals as well, and I'll mix it up. So I'll do heavy weights on one day of them, and then the next time I'll use lighter weights and just like do the reps until I can't move my arms. And that is what seems to be putting the size on for me. Like over the last, I've noticed a big difference over the last year or two of doing that. So yeah.
Does it ever drive you crazy how much the general public just thinks that bodybuilders are the same as powerlifters when it comes to training, where a lot of people just assume, oh, like how much you bench, how much you lift, and they just don't realize that that is not part of the sport? Because even as someone that never competed, that drove me crazy listening to my friends have to answer that question every 100 times they went to the gym.
Well, so I've done powerlifting. I competed once, and when we first started working out, that's all we did. We did used to do deadlifts, used to do a lot of bench, squats. I didn't really start doing too much of until probably in the last 10 years, because we never had the proper setup for it. But I can bench over 200. And I want to do another powerlifting competition because I'm fourth in the world in my age and weight class for push pull. So I know I can better that. I think that was 3 years ago. I did 180 on the bench, and I hadn't been training for it at all. I just said, oh, I want to do this, and so I did 180, and I did maybe 310 or so on my deadlift. So I know I could probably push it to 220 on a bench, and my goal is to try and get 350 on a deadlift. So I'd still like to do that. So we kind of mix it up. We will do deadlifts. We will do rack pulls. We don't do flat bench every time. Do a lot of incline, that type of thing. But I do put a lot of that in as well, because my husband, like, he competed in the powerlifting as well, so we kind of mix up the workouts there.
How are you doing all this without a coach? Because so many people that I talk to, their best piece of advice is always get a coach, get a coach. And you're like one of maybe 5 or 6 guests I've had on where you've achieved a pro card without having a coach. How do you do it?
I think it's just, I mean, it helps that my husband is very knowledgeable as well. It does help that you've got my daughter that she's the IFBB pro. She's a personal trainer. She doesn't want to train her parents, but she's there if you need to ask questions of. But I think it's just years of always reading about stuff, always having worked out. Um, like 40 years ago, my husband actually owned a gym in our little town here when they weren't so popular, and I think it's something he enjoys doing. That's why he has so much knowledge. He likes to say he's my coach. So if I had to say I had a coach, he kind of is my coach.
Hey, whatever works for you, because personally, if my significant other was my coach, I've talked to so many people like that. And it's like how you guys are able to stay married and stay in a relationship. More power to you, because I've talked to people that they were on preps at the same time too, and it's like, who is watching you guys then? Because good God, but at what point in your prep do you really start to get a little bit mind foggy, a little bit out of it? Because that to me is another unsung thing, that it's like the amount of stuff that you deal with on that end mentally, just of the depletion. How long does it take you on average before you finally start to be like, okay, I might need someone watching me 24/7 just to make sure I don't do something really stupid?
It's probably the last 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah, and it again, it depends um, on where you're at and where you think you want to be at, right? So that depends on how much you're sort of cutting back, but definitely that last month is probably it's the most difficult. Yeah.
I've heard, yeah, for a lot of people that is similar. And if someone were to walk up to you and say, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing you'd like to see changed?
I think it's certainly at the pro shows, I would like to see them rotate the judges through more. I like to watch the Olympia every year, and it's the same judges judging that. Um, we know it's a judge. We know there's politics. We know there's all of that involved in it. But I just think it's too bad that they don't rotate judges through so that it's not always the same group that are seeing the same people. And maybe we would see some different outcomes at shows if they did that. But yeah, I'm sure there's lots of people that could be qualified to judge at that level, instead of just having the same one do it like seriously every year for the last however many years it's been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard a few stories like that too, where, yeah, you do need some variety too, because if it's the same person judging, kind of what they're looking for. And although that may be good in some areas too, there's just human error in everything. Let's be completely honest. And you're talking to a guy that played baseball, basketball, and football. So trust me, I know all about human error when it comes to officiating and reffing. There were times where I almost wanted to tell my catcher, just move aside for this pitch and don't even just move aside, let it hit the umpire, basically. But, yeah, unfortunately, that happens in, almost all sports. But when we do have you on a year from today, because I'd like to have you on again, just to give us an update, where would you like to be at? What are some goals that you have? And what would you like to have achieved when we have you back on in a year?
Well, it would be super nice to win a pro show, but I won't hold my breath on that. But maybe one of the ones because I am going to do some of the ones, the masters. So, like I say, I'll be in the over 60 group. So I'm kind of hoping that I can win at least in my age class next year as a start.
Yeah. And I mean, I've just been so fascinated by especially the master's classes, because just how much that has grown too as well. And there's even, more competitors. And yeah, I just keep inspiring people, and just, yeah, even just looking at your Instagram page, it's just super inspiring to know that, like, yeah, you can, nothing, anything's possible really. And it's just so great. And lastly, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Well, I don't know. I can't think of anyone.
Hey, honest, I like that. I've had some people where literally they just start making up stuff and you're just like, oh, okay, whatever. But again, Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. I really, really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing what's in store for you. And, if I ever feel really, really good about myself, I'll just make sure to look at your Instagram page, and then I'll humble myself a little bit and just be like, okay, humble it down a little bit. But again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. It's very nice to talk to you.
I appreciate that. Well, everyone, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.